All right, are we recording?
We are.
Okay, here we are on the Blind Man in Black, and we have a very special episode. It's a Mother's Day episode, and I'm here with my mother and my wife mother. Welcome, both of you.
Wife, mother, that's a little weird.
It's kind of Chinatown, right? My daughter,
Yeah,
my sister, my daughter, my sister. So, Mom, so you are a former model, real estate agent, lighting consultant, and esthetician. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you. It's an honor.
Well, I'm happy to have you here. It's great. We can celebrate everything that is motherly, right?
So,
So, Rachel, you said you kind of wanted to frame the context a little bit because I'm psychotic or something.
Something like that, yeah. I mean, I didn't say that, but it was implied. Well, I wanted to say that first of all, I horned in on this interview because I wanted to be part of it because Judith and I have a pretty unusual and close connection and relationship that has nothing to do with you. It has more to do with us being mothers. And I think that our relationship developed as two mothers before it developed as daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, in my opinion. And that is because she and I have had very similar timelines or experiences in our lives. And I just kind of wanted to show some of those because they're important to who Judith is for sure, and to who you are, and who she is as a mother, and who I am as a mom. But Judith and I have both kind of been free spirits. So we both had a lot of different careers and kind of bounced around the world. And we both were first and only children of short-lived young marriages that went on to have other children in other marriages, and always kind of felt like the odd man out because of that. We have been married more than once, both of us. Third time's a charm. We married very similar men in all the cases. One, entertainers, and in one case, bad people, and then settled with a very good men in the end. We both have two sons that are very far apart in age. Both and all four children had a disability of some sort. We both have been single moms and had to start over and over and over and over before. And we both, I think that Judith is so wise beyond her years, but so young for her years. And her ability to, Weeby and I came into your life like a hurricane, and we haven't, ever
tornadoes, fire tornadoes specifically.
We never stopped blowing, really. I mean, we don't. We were pretty feral, both of us, and we came in super feral. And I remember the first time meeting Judith and going in this beautiful home that everything was perfect as a pin and quiet and peaceful, and no shoes and just this sanctuary, and just thinking, oh God, we're gonna last 5 seconds here because we're so the opposite of all of that. But she has taken us to heart as family immediately. I never have once felt judged by her. Even though we're kind of the opposite of how she's set her life up, she has embraced us both and made us feel so comfortable and loved. And I think that her ability to do that was passed down to you. And I think that because you've kind of taken us in very, you've taken it all very well. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that about Judith, that she is the reason I felt very comfortable being myself and letting my son be himself in her home and in her world. And she welcomed us. And I think that's a lot to do with her life and how she's had to adjust so many times and adapt. And she just loves unconditionally. And I think it's beautiful. And I think she's wonderful. And that's how I wanted to start this off, because I think that that's the most important thing about Judith, is that she, as a mother and just as a person, is just full of love and life and kindness and acceptance.
Well, Rachel,
it was a beautiful introduction. Thank you for saying that. Mom, you were going to say something. I interrupted you. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that was really, really wonderful. And And because Rachel and I have discovered we have so many parallels in life, it's almost like we were meant to be together, um, to go through a lot more things together. And my feeling about Rachel and her two sons has never faltered for a moment. I welcome them and love them because there was no other way, because I felt they were, I felt, I felt Rachel had so much inside her and so much beauty and so much talent and so much love, even from the beginning. And so to make her feel comfortable in a situation that was probably very stressful for her, because she's moving in with her in-laws and not knowing what I was like or whatever. And she has made me feel comfortable with um, having her.
Fire
It's not,
tornadoes.
yes.
You've
They're
embraced the
two
chaos.
couples, but yeah, so and it's not easy to move in with someone who you totally don't know, or you don't. But my heart, from when I first met Rachel, I saw things very deep in without even knowing, and now it's just like a bottomless pit of information of beauty and life and what we've gone through. And it's so wonderful for me to be able to. Rachel has brought out a lot of things in me. She's helped me come out of myself, because I've been so concentrated on just making life work, and is helping me bring out a side that I thought was buried a long time ago. And so it's actually, she's helping me to become me, a person on my own, without my sons, without my husbands.
Did you
Just the
say
one.
plural?
Yeah, well, I've had three, so.
Oh, I thought you meant like you were polygamous. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I might be, but I'm not going to.
You don't know her.
Wow. So this is an exclusive. My mother is a polygamist.
So yeah, so that was, I'm overwhelmed with Rachel's introduction, but yes, I love her very much, and I love her sons, and I see.
Hear that, Marcelo?
Yeah. You hear that, pal? Like he's gonna watch this.
But
Call your mother on Mother's Day.
Basically, what we're saying is that if something happens between you and I, you're moving, not me.
Yeah.
I had a feeling that was the case. I really did. All right, I'm sorry, Mom, but get a little bit closer to the mic. Your sound's good, but just a little bit closer, and it'll be perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So shall we start from the beginning? What is the genesis of Judith?
Well, I think when I stop to think about my life, it's mostly about of just fighting through life from when I was little. So I've just had this determination of, when you feel like you want to be alone and you go and sit on a rock somewhere, that's always been my quiet place, my comforting place, because I didn't really feel like I had an adult I could rely on. I think that I've mentioned this before. I felt fed and clothed, but yeah. So at this time of my life, I'm reviewing all that and reviewing some of the things I went through, and how I often wonder how I ever found the courage to pull myself through life, because so much of it was alone. I mean, I could start back way from, moving from place to place or house to house, and with, my grandmother, my mother and father, et cetera, et cetera. But that was a very unstable way to feel, because I always felt kind of like the extra shoe in the room, and So I fought that, and I fought that feeling of being alone, and even in a room full of people, or in a classroom, or I moved around from a lot of different. I must have went to 5 different elementary schools, and so you always feel like last man out, and I always felt behind. And that was not a good feeling, as a child, you want to feel reassured and whatever, but I always was just kind of hanging out there. And um, not that I wasn't fed and clothed, I was, but I didn't have the emotional comfort probably I needed to feel confident in myself. And, I wasn't particularly good in school because I always felt behind, my moving around a lot. And I was very shy you know, about that aspect of feeling lost and like I was behind, and that, everybody looks at you when you're not being able to give an answer in class. And so that was kind of how I felt at the beginning. But okay, so that was how I kind of started out. And
Well, let's start out as with why you had to move around so much. Let's talk about your parents. What was their deal?
Well, I'm sorry,
okay,
can I just interject and give you a little context? Is Judith, you just had a landmark birthday, which is why you're doing a lot of this reflecting, but no one's going to know what that birthday is unless you say it, because they wouldn't be able to tell. Can you say what birthday you just had?
yes, I just had my 80th birthday, and uh, I'm learning to celebrate that, and and figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So, um, yeah. So
Because nobody's going to know that by looking at you. So I think that's important to
The-
know. That's
Yeah,
where you're at.
you know what's interesting about it is that, like, hearing your voice, Mom, I would not know. I mean, your voice sounds exactly the same as when you were in your 40s. So,
oh,
like,
really?
like I mean, now that I can't see, I mean, I don't know what's going on visually, but you
She doesn't
sound the
look 80
same.
either. Trust me.
Yeah. Well, that's what I hear from most people, right?
Yeah.
You can see with your heart, Brian, and that's the most important thing in life. You
Turn
need to
on your hot light.
stay on your heart light. You can
So
see
I'm
with
sorry, I
your.
didn't mean to interrupt, but I thought that was important to establish first, because the era and all that.
Oh, well, thank you, Rachel. That was sweet. Yeah. But
So you were born right when World War II was in full swing.
exactly. So I was born in 1941. My uh, my father and mother married just out of high school, and then they both went into service. So
Now,
um,
did they have you? Were you an accident or were you planned?
I have no idea.
So you
I
don't
have
know if your mom became pregnant with you and then they got married, or were they married before?
no, I have no idea.
And they
I
didn't tell you?
No, my mother told me very little, and my life was pretty hectic because I was back and forth a lot, with my grandmother and my dad, or my grandparents, or my mother and my stepfather eventually, and yeah. So I don't know. Now I forgot your question.
No, I just wanted to ask, so like, talk a little bit about your parents, like just kind of describe where they came from and what was going on with them.
Okay,
Betty and Jack.
yeah, so my parents were married just out of high school. I'm not even sure exactly, but I know they were married just out of high school. And very much of my memory of this, or what I've tried to get, my mother was not good at opening up and telling me things. So it was very difficult for me to try to trace my past accurately. And when I asked her to help me with that, she says, "Oh, I can't do that." So, I had all these blanks as an adult that I wanted to fill in and see why I might have had the feelings I had, or how I felt. I had this feeling about my dad. Uh, always, it was something that I clung to. I thought, oh, he's probably, this magical person, because I had nothing else to cling to. And, my mother wasn't exactly later. I lost my train of thought here, Brian. You want me to tell you, help
Yeah,
me here.
just tell what the kind of life they came from.
Well, they were married very young, right out of high school, and then the war began. So,
Right, but what was Jack? He came from a family of like 8
10,
brothers or something in
yeah,
Auberry, California, in the mountains near Shaver Lake, right?
yes, he was born into a family of 10. And so he had a lot of brothers and sisters, and he was a mountain. It was
A mountain man.
a mountain man, yes. And he continued to be a mountain man most of his life. But yeah, so that part of his life I know a little bit about. But my mother, there's a kind of a mystery there about uh, exactly when my dad went in the service. Shall I go to the point of where he lost his leg, or yes?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can do that, but where did Betty come from? She came from like Ohio, and we don't really know much about her background, right?
No, all I know is that my grandmother and her father uh, divorced. And then my grandmother and my mom came out here, and I think go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, and they were Catholic, which was a huge no-no at that time, divorce. And that'll
Yes,
kind of
and
play into, your own religious
Oh,
yes,
upbringing as well, right?
yeah, yeah, they were, and but I have so many, what I want to say, clouds over what happened after I was born. And I know that my dad lost a leg in the Battle of the Bulge. And I have a newspaper clipping that shows my mother went in the wax, that shows my mother at my father's
What
bedside.
does that stand for?
What wax?
Yeah.
Women's Army Corps?
Okay.
Women's
Yeah,
Army, yeah, auxiliary or something like that. Yeah.
I think it's Women's Army Corps, but yeah, so she went in also. And I don't think she ever went overseas, but my dad did lose a leg in the Battle of the Bulge. And
Now, what I heard is that the reason he lost his leg or was put in the situation where he lost his leg is because he had stolen a Jeep and went to Paris or something, and his punishment was to be on the front lines of the war in the Battle of the Bulge.
I don't know that for certain, but that was the story. And so it may have been, my
He was a
dad
little
was
bit of a rebel.
he was very and he was a very athletic, strong man. I mean, he was, um, I guess he played football in college and so forth. So uh, he might have been a bit of a renegade. I don't know,
He was a
but he
sheriff later on, though, wasn't he?
oh yeah, he became the only. My dad became the only one of two disabled. He'd lost a leg and he had a wooden leg, who became a sheriff.
Well,
I
let's
think.
let's correct that a little bit because in California, the sheriff system wasn't created until like the 70s or something. So it was like
Mhm.
before that, it was like a constable system. So he was a
I see.
constable first.
He was
Yeah.
a
And then
constable.
later on, he had to like train as a deputy and start all over. And he had to go through like basic training. And I remember a story hearing about like the joint of his knee like broke, and he had to stick a screwdriver in there to finish his running training.
Ah,
Oh, that's absolutely. He was the toughest man. He was physically strong, even though he had one leg, and
And those
he.
legs weren't like they are now. They were like wooden and leather and
Oh no, his leg probably weighed a ton. He had a huge, probably 5, 6 inch heavy belted strap around his waist to strap this heavy leg on. And he used to, his leg was so heavy, and he'd have to swing it to walk because he had this stump. And So it was very difficult for him. And it was very difficult when he came back, with the loss of a leg. And I'm very foggy about this, but I think there's a newspaper picture in the Fresno paper of my mother and father together. However, it looked like she was she had joined the WACS, or the Women's Army Corps, and he, of course, was in the Army, and they were in the hospital together. But I have a hunch that it wasn't too long after that my mother divorced him.
Now,
So,
the story that I heard once, and it may be just a rumor, a vicious rumor, but the story I heard was that she said to him, "You're half a man. I'm done."
I can't say one way or another, but that's what I heard. And
Which makes
so
sense. I mean, she was kind of mean.
What did you call her again? Old iron pants?
pants. We called her old iron pants, but so
And
But-
and I should mention this because just to kind of front load her personality, my brother told me one time when he was visiting her, like in the early 80s or something, like they were watching Merv Griffin and Donald Trump was on there. And she's like, "Boy, I like that Donald Trump. He's neat."
and that tells you the whole story right there. That tells you the whole story about my mother. And so,
She was obsessed with money, people with power and money. Yeah.
that's what impressed her more than the heart things, or who a person is, or the depth of their personality, or it was, or the depth of their education even. It's like not even looking into who he was. And at the time I was married to your father, and I remember when that election came up, and I said to I said to my brother and sister that that Trump was really a bad man. And so that, and my mother, the same thing. She was totally caught up with, not because she read about his politics or his life or whatever, because he had money. And that was what impressed my mother. My mother didn't have a lot of money. I mean, she married my stepfather, and we had a normal life when I eventually lived with him. But she was very impressed all the time with who you were and what you had. And, didn't exactly, it was.
And she also kind of had I don't want to say a deceptive personality, because I remember you saying that whenever there was like a social gathering or something, right before people would arrive, she'd say, what did she say?
Oh, golly. It's showtime, so that was her big thing about anything. She'd say it's showtime, and she turned into this other personality. And that was her persona. That was who she was, because she would be one person and then be another person. So she had a few problems, to say the least.
Rachel,
So-
do you have that photo?
No, it's downstairs. And before I showed it on my
Oh.
phone, which I had off for bandwidth reasons.
Okay, that's okay. All right, look, I want to go
I
back a
could
little
draw.
bit
I
because
could draw my
feel
rendition of it. I could draw a rendition of it on my.
okay. Do that, and while I'm talking to my mother here,
Okay.
what
work on
Mom, I know you had a lot of affection for your father. Can you share some like early memories of your father?
Well, at one point, I lived with my father and his mother, who I called my cuddly grandma, because she had had 10 children and was the sweetest thing on two legs. And at one point, I lived with my father and my grandmother. And what was your question again? I'm sorry, I lost it now.
Like, was there an affection? I remember you saying you had some affectionate moments with your father, either like riding horses or him coming to visit you and you waiting for him. And
Yeah, so here's the way. One of the things was is I lived with he and my grandma for uh, a while, and that was as a child seemed like a happy time, a happy time when I was with the three of them, and he would take off his heavy wooden leg, and he'd put my slippers on his ears, and he'd jump over chairs, and he'd do things that just, as a child, just delighted me, that made me feel wanted and loved, and that was a short period because we didn't live together too long before he married my stepmother. And so, but always had this fantasy of my father being, I used to carry a picture of him in my wallet with a cowboy hat on. I used to think of him as Robert Mitchum, that he was some kind of a star, or, something, that my dad was something really special. But I didn't get to be with him very long. And I lived with he and my stepmother at one point, but
And your mom would shit talk him all the time, right?
my mom would put him down in every sense of the word, and she'd put eventually my stepmother down, and it just, I was, how can I say this? So I have my mom and my grandparents on that side, and my grandma over here, and I always felt pulled between so many people, but yet, like I said, I was fed and clothed, but not nourished in an emotional way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it also seems like it was really difficult to find the truth, right? Because here's another story that I heard. I don't know where I heard it. Was that okay? So you heard the first story about Betty saying to Jack, you're half a man, right? And then there's
Mhm.
another story that Betty caught him cheating with you, which became your stepmother, right?
Yes, and I don't know the truth in that. I don't
Yeah,
know because my
it's very
dad and
dramatic.
my dad and my stepmother's husband were very good friends, really
Ooh,
good friends. And so they
plot
were,
thickens.
What's
I'm
that?
sorry?
I said the plot thickens.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, my dad and my stepmother's husband were tight friends. And then he died. And so I think what happened is my dad started dating my stepmother, and whether he swooped in, she had two children um, from that marriage, but she lost her husband. So nothing is totally clear about that, except eventually, my dad, you know, came home to my grandma's where we lived and said that they were getting married. And yeah, so
But there were also, I mean, you had some, and Rachel, I want to parallel here in a minute, but there were also some odd kind of almost abusive things that were happening, which probably at the time weren't seen as abuse, but like talk about like the potato peel. So you had him putting on your slippers on as ears, but he also did like the potatoes. Let's talk about that.
okay, so the slippers on the ears was before he married my stepmother.
Okay.
And then then at one point, my mother sent me to live with he and my stepmother, and her two children. So the memories I have of that, I was in very young grammar school, and always feeling behind a little bit or left out. And my dad uh, did things which, he ordered a big pile of used bricks. If anybody could relate to this, they're covered with mortar
But
and so.
before you get into that, his property, he would take anybody's junk, like anybody's shit. His property was filled with like old toilets and like, I guess it was the depression mentality. You don't throw anything away, right?
And that was later when he bought a ranch. That was later in life when he did that.
Okay.
At, at this point, I was still in grammar school, and he um, he he got this pile of bricks and he put me out there scraping mortar off the bricks with a, I don't know what it was, some kind of tool. And, and then I had other memories. One time, my stepmother, she told me to peel these potatoes for dinner, and I'm little. And so I was peeling them, and my dad came home and she said, "Look what she's done to the potatoes. They're thick now. She's peeled all the potato off, and there's just the potato." Yeah, anyway, and my father came in and said, "I want you to eat all those potato peelings." So he made me eat the pile of dirty potato peelings. And so,
How did that make you feel?
well, I just felt like I'd done something terribly wrong, and why, it wasn't my fault. I had a paring knife, not a potato peeler. I had a paring knife.
And
And
how
I
old were
remember,
you?
I'm sorry?
And how old were you?
Oh, just probably fourth grade,
Yeah.
maybe.
I
Yeah,
can't peel
really.
potatoes now, and I'm 45.
So he made me eat these dirty raw potato peelings, and so um and I never things like what I had to do or work around the house or everything was I think now there are all kinds of kids who have to do things in other countries that are tough, so but I always was having to do some kind of job, and I always felt pretty much alone, even though I had my um, stepbrother and stepsister. They were younger, but it was rough. And
Do you
then,
feel like you had to take on, you know, you didn't feel like you are part of the family because were they doing that kind of shit? Were they having to eat potato peels
oh
and
gosh,
scrape
no, gosh,
mortar?
you know, no. And so, no, of course not. And, I was the one who had to do things, and my father would, the only time I remember all of us getting, uh, they used to have poker parties, and myself and my two, the stepbrother and sister, were playing in the bedroom, and they were jumping from bed to bed, and and my father came in with his belt, which was about 4 inches wide, and
Like a
we,
WWF wrestler belt?
yeah, yeah, and so I got spanked with that belt,
But they didn't
and
get spanked?
no,
What the fuck's up with that?
Well, technically, they weren't his kids, right? I mean, they were his stepchildren. So
so
maybe he wasn't
yeah,
allowed to.
so I just got spanked because I was the oldest, and I was supposed to be, and we were just playing. We were in the bedroom playing, but they were playing poker and didn't want to be disturbed, and probably had a few drinks or whatever, parents do. So, and I thought many times when I lived with my dad, um, I remember getting a baby duck, and then all of a sudden my baby duck was missing, and
And you found
I
it on
thought,
your plate for breakfast?
no, but I felt that somebody had destroyed it or whatever. But I felt, very much alone, and I thought of running away a couple times, and
Didn't you have an odd experience with a cat and your mom? Your mom did something with kittens or something?
yes, that was later when I was living with my mother and my stepfather. Yes, absolutely, and I'll tell you about that because it seemed like I had a bunny when I lived with my dad called Twinkles, and I had this big black and white bunny. And then the bunny had babies, and they took Twinkles and the babies and got rid of them. Well, that was kind of a pattern in my life. So my mother, yeah, took my bunny or my stepmother and father. And so anyway, things that I loved seemed like were often vanished, and so yeah, I was kind of like on my own, I climbed trees, I'd go out and sit on a rock, and that was pretty much the way I felt most of my life, as not like, you're there with your kids and you're teaching them new things. And and my father was very harsh when I was in grammar school. If I didn't get my math or something, he'd get pretty tough with me, and so, and it was funny because I had this admiration or this love for him, this feeling like he was some kind of movie star, I guess is what I'd say. But so,
You
yeah,
think that
so
you're idealizing him a little bit?
maybe I think so. I think that I had to, I was looking for that something to cling to all the time when I was little, and it was very lonely, because I didn't feel, I felt lonely in school and I felt lonely at home. And, you know, finally my mother came one time and she used this excuse, and don't ask me why, but she said, "Oh, my daughter's not going to be out there cleaning bricks." But I didn't feel like she was trying to protect me. She had an alternative reason. Uh,
She had
What
her
do you
own
think?
brick to clean at her house.
right. So she took me back, and then I was with my mother and grandparents. And so, but I have this whole wash of, I don't know. I know my mother and her mother were fighting all the time. Whether my mother was dating or what she was doing, I don't know. But there was a lot of arguing going on in the house all the time. So um,
Let's
I
take
finished
a
my
rate.
portrait,
Let's.
by the way.
I'm sorry.
I finished my portrait.
Oh, you
Oh,
did?
there she is. Old Iron Pants. That's my
She's
mom.
got her shirt says Betty, and she's saying, "It's showtime," and she's got angry eyebrows.
Rachel, that's really perfect.
So
Yeah.
let's do a Rachel parallel break. So your father was had a dual personality, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he had a dual personality. He was just complicated. He had some issues with emotional regulation, that's for sure. But I think similar to Judith, I mean, it was different circumstances on some level, but with the same result. My parents divorced really young. You know, they got married really young, divorced really young. I was the only product of that relationship. And then my mother remarried and had 2 children with my stepfather, but my father did not. He never remarried and never had anything even remotely nice to say about marriage ever again, actually. Uh, and I was very accepted in my stepfather's home, and I was treated very similar. I mean, I was treated the same as the other kids. The problem was that then they got divorced, and the second that happened, I was no longer part of that family, period. Like, so it was, I mean, it's not worse, but you know, I didn't have that rejection until all of a sudden it was very clearly drawn in the sand that I was not part of that family once it broke up. And so to watch, and you know, my stepfather had this giant, beautiful ranch, Squirrel Creek Ranch, that he had, you know, his father and his father, whatever. And I lived with my dad primarily until they got married. And then my dad and my stepfather really liked each other. They got along really well. And my dad kind of reluctantly, you know, sent me over there because he trusted my stepdad and wanted me to have that life on that beautiful ranch and that family environment and the horses and all that stuff. And then when my mom and him split up, I just kind of got launched back into my dad's tiny apartment or my grandmother's house or wherever he was living. And then I'd watch my brother and sister, my half siblings, go get picked up by my stepfather and taken back to their home that used to be my home, and with the dad that used to be one of my dads. And I felt very, very weird about that and separated and rejected. But my dad never remarried, and he just put his full concentration on me. And so he was very protective and possessive of me and very invested. But he also was had some major anger issues, and he had some serious mental illness stuff going on. And he would, rage and destroy everything in the house over little things. And he was very like that the whole walking on eggshells thing is an understatement. You know, just my whole childhood was spent learning to read him and learning to get around him and learning to pacify him and please him. And that is, I think, similar to what Judith, you know, it's Judith's vision of her father as this hero on this pedestal, even though he made her eat dirty potato peels. I mean, I have that same dichotomy with my father. My father was terrifying sometimes, and he was very verbally abusive at times. And I still absolutely idolized him. And I think it came from wanting his acceptance so badly, just wanting him to just one day not get mad at every little thing and think I was great instead of, you know, screaming at me if I lost my retainer like I had blown up a tiny planet and, you know, breaking all of my belongings and his belongings, and you know, the litany was just impressive. But you know, that one day I was going to get past that, and he would never be that way towards me again, because I'd have done everything perfect, because, you know, because he was, I think that when fathers are like that, when they're kind of terrible like that, but also wonderful, they get this godlike status where you're just like, if I could just make him happy, then I'll stop getting the rash and I'll be blessed with the blessings that come down from him. And I had that dynamic with my dad till the day he died, which was not that long ago. So, but I mean, I think it has the same result as what Judith is experiencing with this, like idolizing someone who is flawed, and it's maybe not the most amazing person on earth, but you just want their acceptance so much. And I think it's a dynamic between daughters and fathers more so than maybe sons and fathers or sons and mothers. Like, I think there's just I think the differences in the sexes has something to do with it too. Because I don't think that I don't know any women who say that about their moms. Like, they're just, you know, they put their mom on a pedestal. Like, I think you just try to emulate your mom, whereas your dad, you're trying to impress because it's someone else. You know, they represent someone else as opposed to a extension of you. Welcome to my TED Talk.
All right, Mom, let's get back to your story. All right, so you're moving around a lot between your father's place and your mom and her parents. And so what happened what happened after that in high school and so on?
Oh, golly. Well, my mother and stepfather married, and my stepfather was a very sweet man. And he was from a family of 10 people, which was good. I mean, that was
German. Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Heisentrader.
Heisentrader, and they had a large family, and he was a hardworking guy. He was a sweet man, and so I.
If you don't obey, we cut off your fingers and toes.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, he was a good man, but
there's a but in there. Did she freeze up?
She froze up.
All right, let's wait till she comes back. I feel like we can save this. I think we're okay.
Okay. I don't think she knows she's frozen up.
Okay. It's funny because I didn't get a notification that her bandwidth was low. Everything seems to be okay.
Do you want me to turn my video off?
No, let's wait, see what happens and see if she comes back.
Okay. I'm doing another portrait of her in her go-go boots outfit.
Yeah, why don't you try just turning off your video for a second and see if she comes back?
Okay.
Let's see if that helps.
I'm out. Oh, she went away completely.
All right, maybe she can come back.
Should I go help her? I should go help her.
All right.
For a second.
Well, I don't want to stop it because then it splits up the recording. So.
No, I know. Do you want me to go help her though?
Just tell her she just needs to log back in, and we'll go from there.
All right, got it. While I'm gone, you talk about what great moms we are.
All right. Yeah, this is really great because I really wanted to learn more about my mother and understand, where she came from and what influences she had, how she was affected by the experiences in her life. And I'm really excited because, she has a very, kind of diverse kind of backgrounds, you know. So we're going to talk more in a few minutes. We'll talk about how she got into modeling. She was in the film and television industry, and then she met my father, and we're going to get into that. And so yeah, there's some really interesting stories, and she's dated some celebrities. So I'm excited to hear about that because I don't know very much about that. And so yeah, so I'm excited. This is great because I wanted to capture my mother's life and understand uh, her influences, you know. And then sometimes we like talk and like, you know, we'll have an argument or something, and she'll say, "Well, you don't know what happened in my life." And like, so was kind of my thinking is I want to know more. I want to learn more. So you know, and I tell this to everybody. Like I tell this to Rachel. I tell this to everybody. If you tell me what's going on, I have more empathy. And I think that's so important because it reminds me of the Martin Luther King quote. And I'm not talking about hate, but this is the quote. I think he says, "Men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't understand each other. They don't understand each other because they don't communicate, and they don't communicate because they're separated." And so I think that's really encapsulates a lot of like our conflicts as human beings is people get angry with each other because they don't understand the the causality of why people are the way they are. Generally, I think trauma, you know, being externalized causes so many problems and issues. And so it's so important, like I think as human beings, that we understand each other and empathize with each other. And so we can, you know, get to the root causes of why we are the way we are and do the things that we do. So I'm really excited because I want to hear, and it's so odd because you know I'm 43 now, and it took so long to get to this point where I can like sit down and be like, okay, I want to hear what's going on because you know you go through life and you do your shit and you do selfish stuff and you're like just constantly thinking about like one's own needs, and it's great to come back and reflect and like kind of talk about this stuff. And I'm even though, you know, I'm 43, my mother's 80. It's an opportunity. It's just like this is the moment to like really do it. And I'm glad I recognized this at this point in my life, the desire to want to do this. So I'm really really excited, and I keep saying that like a broken record, but I want to learn more about my mother. I love her very much, and I appreciate the life that she has given me. I mean, we've been through a lot of shit, and we're going to hear a little bit about that with my. We moved to upstate New York, and we had you know, she remarried, and that was not the best situation, and we'll hear about that. And
We might hear about it.
what's going on?
We're having issues. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to bring her up here, and I'm going to put her on my screen, and then I can either just be in here and interject, or you know, whatever. But her computer it's not working. It's taking forever to load. It's just not going to do it.
Do you think there's something wrong with her computer?
I don't know. I don't know what the problem is, but for the sake of time,
We got to get some malware bites on that computer or something.
Yeah. I think it's because the bandwidth's fine. It's not that. It's something to do with her computer. So I'm going to bring her up here.
It may be that she needs to update her Zoom app or something.
It's something like that. It's on
Yeah.
the computer's end. So hold, please. Keep talking. I'm going to move her.
I'm not used to doing monologues. This is very awkward.
You're doing fantastic.
Okay, so you're hearing everything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
All right. So, yeah, and you know, my mom and I have been through so much, and I want to say this, and I wish she was here to hear it because I have a kind of duality within myself. I have an enormous amount of fear, and I think that comes from my father in a lot of ways because my father is very fearful. He isolates himself, and he you know, he has OCD and I have OCD, and you know, that's all fear-based shit. It's about control and fear, and like, so my mother though, I mean, she loves fearlessly. She, you know, takes chances and experiences life to the fullest. And it's odd because, like, it's funny that my mother and Rachel have of these parallels, because it's so fucking weird. And I'll say why. I went to my therapist. I don't have a therapist now, but I went to a therapist in the beginning of our relationship because I was like, I need to work out a little bit of shit. And and so I remember telling my therapist, I was like, I don't understand. It's like I met Rachel on a blind date. It was literally a blind date. We didn't know really much about each other. It's not like, I get it. Like, if you're attracted to what you know, right? So, like, I get it if I had seen Rachel in the mine shaft or something, which is a bar, and I looked across the room and I was attracted to her, and then, like, we developed a relation. That didn't happen at all.
Wait, why are we hanging out at the mine shaft? Who's hanging out? Who hangs out?
It's just a hypothetical.
All right, so I've got her up here. I'm
Okay.
going to go down and mess with her computer for a minute, but then I'm going to come back and we're probably just going to share this one.
Okay. Yeah. Let's just
share it. Yeah.
Okay, so you guys go ahead. I'll be back.
Okay. So what do you want to know next?
So let me just finish my thoughts. So it's, as I was telling my therapist, I was like, I don't understand why my mother and my girlfriend Rachel at the time, why they have so many parallels. It's so weird. And he's like, well, it's just, that's just how the universe is or whatever. And it is weird. But so here we are, we're back, Mom. And so we're talking about basically your high school years, or getting into that. And like, so you moved in with your mother and your stepfather, and you're saying he was a very sweet man from a German family with a lot of kids.
Yeah. So yeah, and then I had of course later on, my brother was born, and then
Your half brother, yeah.
my half brother, and then my other half brother. So I have another brother who was estranged from the family, but he was 7 years younger than my older brother. And then
Estranged now, not immediately at birth.
I'm sorry?
He's estranged now, but not immediately at birth. He was
No. He's estranged now. So
right.
But no, that wasn't until his adult life. And then when I was in junior high school, my sister was born. So there was two half brothers and a half sister, and and went to high school and so on and so forth. It was it was a big family, my stepfather's family. So where do you want me to go from here with this?
Well, I just want to get the dynamic, like how were you treated versus them? Did you, because there is a theme here. I'm hearing that you felt alone. You felt like you weren't a part of your father's family or your mother's family, right?
Well, it's very hard. So, my stepfather was, married to my mom, but they had a very dynamic family. My stepfather did, a lot of kids.
Very close-knit German family.
Very close-knit, big Christmases, that type of thing. But, it's hard to explain when my feeling, because of how I always felt. And they would be very upset if they heard me say this, I'm sure, but
they probably will hear it, but it's okay.
Yeah, so I doubt it. So yeah, but I always felt a little bit on the outside, and it's just because I had been bounced around so much, and I didn't have, if I take, for instance, my cousin, or my stepfather's niece, very confident, very well cared for, and so forth, and had a little bit more than we had, and she was always pampered and dressed, and so I took a lot of heartbreaking type mental and abuse from just because of the way she was. And so
you're talking about your cousin?
it was my cousin.
Right.
And so I
What type of abuse? What did she say?
she was just always putting me down or making fun of my clothes or, something to that nature. And
Do you think
so
she was jealous?
I don't know what she had to be jealous of. She was perfectly groomed and so forth, and I had, uh, I didn't have, the kind of clothes. My parents were doing the best they could do, but my mother would sew me some skirts and things like that. But she was very
So you
pampered.
were very pretty, like you were, you know.
Oh, I didn't feel pretty at all. So here I wasn't. I didn't feel pretty, and so I never felt pretty. Yeah, that wasn't.
What's that about? Do you think it because you're being put down all the time?
Yeah, I think the idea that I was being put down all right, whatever, if there was if there was any physical beauty there, I couldn't see it. I was blind to it. I had no. The only thing I tried to do in high school was kind of clown around to kind of take that pressure off myself, But yeah, so it was, it was painful at times, and I tried, my cousin was she was very popular, and so because I didn't have the best clothes or I didn't have this, you're not part of the, you know how it is in school, you get categorized or whatever. And I was also was not exactly part of their strong German family. So, as much as as you might have thought that, yeah, I was part of the family, I'd never felt part of the family, and that left a big void with me emotionally as I grew up. And so,
So
uh,
what did you decide to do when I mean, did anything interesting happen in high school? Or was there any formative moments there?
I had a moment with my cousin. I wouldn't defend myself, but my young brother had a very bad asthma condition where he had to go in an oxygen tent, and he almost died. And we were in the library in school one day, and she was making fun of my brother. And I stood up in the middle of a quiet library and hollered at her and said, "If you ever make fun of my brother again, I'm going to beat the shit out of you." And so
Did you say that? Really say that? This
I
is
did.
1950 something, right? So
I did. I got kicked out of the library, etc. But I said, "I'm going to beat the shit out of you if you ever say anything about," because my little brother was very, very ill, and it was mean. And so I told her I was going to take her out in the parking lot and beat the shit out of her, which how that came out of me was just because I was so upset that she was saying anything about him. I wouldn't defend myself with her, but I defended my brother. And so, that's kind of bizarre, but that's what happened. And
s- well, I mean, it makes sense, we want to defend our family and I get that. So did you feel like that changed you? Like that was a moment where you stood up and or and
well,
to her or what?
it, it it's it I felt good about doing it for my little brother, and because he was so damn sick, and so I felt really uh, that that was a positive thing to do.
Did
And
that change your
yeah,
relationship with your cousin? Does she knock that stuff
she
off?
she did to an extent. Yeah, she did, because I didn't think she expected it out of me, and she'd done everything. She just used to do mean things. You know how when you're in school and there's a fair on, and you get tickets to school and you're let out at the fair to go see the fair, and so on and so forth. And everybody was going to the fair, and she'd do mean things like she'd tell me that she said, "Oh, I asked if I could go with her." And she said, "Yeah." And then at the last minute, she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, somebody else is going with," that kind of thing, which left me alone and
That's
not able.
bullshit.
Yes, it was. It was very mean. And so why she was so mean to me, I think she just figured I was an outsider in the family, and that's the way she treated me. And yeah, it broke my
And
heart.
this now this is the cousin on your stepfather's side?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
His brother's daughter. But
Okay.
she was pampered and spoiled. And it's interesting, later in life, much later, as we're adults and past many years have passed, she told my mother how very deeply sorry she was that she had treated me so mean, but that was just one of the things she did.
How did you feel about that?
When she told me that, it was interesting to see her admit that she had done that to me, and that she felt bad about it. Um, and I just, it didn't make me feel one way or another, because when I was going through that hell at school, it was horrible. It was horrible because, when you've gone to so many different grammar schools and you're moved around so much, and you never feel that you've got friends or security or whatever, and you're always feeling like the loner, it's
Now,
hard to.
did you feel like that in high school? Like, because it sounded like you told me stories where you went on dates and you had that incident with that guy's car that you
Did we talk about the race?
Oh,
Hey, hold on before that, Rachel. Do you want to join using your phone?
Sure. Yeah, I could try that.
Yeah,
yeah, because it's a computer. It's a software update issue, which I have started to do, but
Okay, why don't you not turn off the software update, because that's going to suck up bandwidth,
Right.
and just join with your phone.
Got it.
Okay.
Oh, you're leaving. Okay. This is interesting.
Tell the race story.
Okay. Well, which was the race story? Oh, so my cousin, who I was just talking about, my cousin, her parents got a brand new Ford Fairlane car, red and white, beautiful new car. Her father was on the police department. They could afford it. They got a beautiful new car. My grandfather had said that if I gave him $50, he'd give me this old Chevy coupe to drive around. Well, I was thrilled because I had no car, and it had holes in the floorboards. I started it with a nail file. It had a gear shift, a big gear shift. And I was so thrilled to have this transportation. And
What kind of car was it?
it was a
Ford?
an old Chevy coupe.
Oh, Chevy. Okay.
Yeah, it was a coupe. It was an old coupe, and a floor stick shift. And
this is from the 40s. Is that the era?
you know, it was in the 50s when I was in school, so it was pretty old. Yeah, it was an old Chevy coupe, but somebody had given it to him. He said if I could earn $50, which I did, he'd give it to me. And so I thought this was so awesome. So I used to drive this car in my bare feet. It had a hole in the floorboard, and in Fresno, it's 100 degrees. So I'd have to tap the gas pedal, and my foot would be hot. And so it was a whole story. But so my cousin, as usual, was making fun of me, and she had this brand new car, and she says, okay, I'll race you to Rancho Drive-In, which was a drive-in. We went for milkshakes and things. So we had this race, and so it was crazy, but we had this race. Here I am in my old car. She's in the new car. Well, we were almost there, and she was a little bit ahead, but there was a railroad crossing, but there was an underpass. And I was kind of getting out in front of her and on a upper street, and she went under the underpass. Well, unbeknownst to her, the underpass was full of water. And so it flooded her parents' brand new car up to the floorboards, and I didn't know where she went. And I went around and I cut through a gas station, and of course, almost took out a gas pump. But anyway, I won. And so, and she didn't come. But anyway, I was so happy because here I was in my old piece of junk car, and I won. Well, I waited, and then she finally came back, or we finally found out she was in the underpass with her parents' brand new car, which was only a couple days old, flooded. So it was like, okay, that's kind of
Did you call
ironic.
your car Grease Lightning?
Yeah. No, actually, I called it Murgatroyd. That was the name of it. So I don't know
What
why.
did you call it?
Murgatroyd.
Okay. What does that mean?
I don't know. It was something from some old movie or something, but yeah. So that was
Okay.
the kind of relationship I had. Is that
Didn't you go on a
really-
date and destroy somebody's brand new car?
Oh yeah. So one time I had a Sunday afternoon, and this guy had asked me to go out. He was going to go out practice shooting out in the country, and he had a brand new Ford, a red soft top convertible. And so he picked me up, and we went out, and it was like Fresno, 100 degrees was nothing. And so we're out in the country, and um, so he asked me if I wanted to try the gun to try to shoot just out in the bushes or whatever. And so I took the gun from him, and all of a sudden I began to feel really dizzy. And I went, I think I'm going to pass out. And as I did, the gun dropped and shot a hole through the roof of his convertible. The top was up, his canvas convertible.
I
And
love that. story.
this poor guy was his pride and joy, his car. And there was a hole blown right through the top of his thing. And me passed out on the ground. So this poor kid.
Why did you pass out? Was it just because it was hot?
Actually, it was my period. So that's why.
It was your
Because
what?
my menstrual cycle.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so so that I probably, it was hot and, whatever. And that's why.
Did you go on a date again after that?
No. No. I think I was danger. I don't know, danger. So yeah, so that was a funny incident, but not funny for him. But yeah, I've done some crazy stuff. So, and that was one of them. But so.
Hey, Rachel.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a little bit of odd feedback. Do you have your earbuds plugged into it?
No.
Okay. I think it's okay. I'm just hearing a little bit of odd noise here. Okay. So what's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, maybe it's you, Mom. Are you, I hear something like you got bells on or something.
No, I'm not moving.
Okay. Okay. So what made you become a model and leave? What made you do that? Because you said you didn't feel pretty. So why did you get into modeling?
Well, here's the thing. I graduated from high school, and I just had this, I guess, fantasy like young girls do about where they, what they want to do. My grades were not that great in high school. So my mother, and I'm not sure it was my grandmother who did it or somebody put away during the war, they put away, you could buy bonds. And so my mother had these bonds. And so she said, well, what are you going to do? And so I said, well, I'd really like to go to modeling school. So we started investigating that a little bit.
Yeah, but why did you get into modeling? You said earlier that you didn't feel pretty. So what?
I didn't, but I wanted to feel pretty. I wanted to do something other than the norm because my academic was not good because I always felt behind. And so I thought, well, maybe I could do something else, something. I didn't know that I could make it into modeling school. I didn't know what, but it was going to give it a try. So we found a modeling school in San Francisco. In order for me to take the courses, I had to get up at 4 a.m. And take a Greyhound bus, which was like a 5 or 6 hour milk run to San Francisco. I get off at Market Street. So you have to figure this is like 1959 or so. I'd get off at Market Street, walk all the way up to Sutter and Grant where the modeling school is. Stay
And it's
there
called,
during
what
the
was it?
day.
What was it? The Robert Powers or something
Yeah,
modeling
Robert
school?
Powers, yeah. And I
Okay.
used to,
Which is still there, right?
I don't know if the school is still there on Sutter. I doubt it, but anyway, so I'd take the bus, I'd walk up to Sutter and Grant, which was quite a ways, and I'd take my classes. Then in the evening, it's dark, and I walk back down to Market Street. I get on the bus, go back to Fresno. I did that twice a week for about 7 months, and to take my classes. And
Why didn't you just move to San Francisco?
well, because the money wasn't there to do that. My
Oh, okay.
parents were just barely making it. There was other kids in the family. I only got to do this because of the bonds that were there.
What did your mom think about you doing modeling?
I think my mom just wanted to get me out of the house.
Okay.
It didn't really matter what I did so much. And maybe, I don't want to be unfair to my mom, but I always
Let's-
felt like mom was pushing me somewhere else. So she had
Okay.
her hands full. She had, 3 other kids. And so, getting rid of one was go ahead. What were you gonna-
I think Rachel might have a parallel. Do you have a parallel here you want to share?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do I? I mean, I was out of the house early.
What did
I
your,
definitely
what did your,
go to modeling
what did Mick used to say to you?
He used to
like-
say a lot of things to me. What do you mean?
In relation to your beauty?
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know where you're getting at.
Didn't he say something it's a good thing you're good looking because blank, blank, blank?
Oh, I mean,
Oh.
he said like if you had a brain, you'd be dangerous, or it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing you're good looking. He's got something going for it. Yeah.
yeah, which is very comforting, of course.
Did you ever, Rachel, did you ever shoot a hole in one of your boyfriend's cars?
No, but my dad did. My dad shot a hole.
Oh, he did?
Oh yeah.
Well, how did he do that?
I was relaying a conversation that I'd had with the said boyfriend's father. I did not get along with his mother very well, and she was very, very rude to me. And at one point, I was rude back to her. And that story was being relayed to his father, who was not married to her, over lunch. And he said, if you had spoken to me like that at my table, I would have smacked the shit out of you or smacked your mouth or something like that. So I went home and told my dad that story, thinking it was funny, like, because I didn't care. And I thought he would laugh, and he did not think it was funny. And he went into a rage and destroyed the house and ripped the phone out of the wall and broke the TV and got his gun and went to said soon to be ex-boyfriend's house and shot at his house and his car.
Like you do.
So
Like you do. And I managed to get the phone like reattached and call them and warn them that he was coming. Like, oh God, get out of the house. My father's coming. And they were wise enough to do so.
Right.
So another parallel.
So that's when I stopped telling
Another
him stuff
shotgun.
like that. Yeah, that's when I stopped telling. I never told my dad when anyone did anything mean to me or anything. It was just not worth it. So I kept that kind of stuff from him after that story.
Right. Okay. So let's go back to modeling school. And then how did you meet Herb Caen?
Oh, well, that was because what happened is after I finished my modeling school, I moved up to the city. I had a roommate for a brief period, and then we had a little tiny apartment that looked out at another wall. That was my first one that looked out at another wall. But anyway, she eventually had some emotional issues and went back. And then I had to get an apartment by myself, which I got a little studio that looked out at another wall, and I would ride the bus to the modeling school and at work, and then I'd come home. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up doing kind of a Girl Friday type job at the modeling school. And then also when a modeling
What does
job,
that mean, Girl Friday?
a little bit of everything, kind of a
Is that a
secretary,
saying?
receptionist,
Like a PA or a gopher.
huh?
But is that a saying, Girl Friday? I've never heard of
Yeah,
that.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
you heard of that, Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm clueless.
Well,
All right, go ahead.
It's something that was then and maybe not now. So
You
anyway,
watched a bunch of old movies. I think you would have heard that before.
yeah, a Girl
I'll tell you another
Friday is
thing,
somebody
Charlie.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Girl Friday
So-
is somebody who's doing
So
all
you were
kinds
doing a bunch of stuff at the modeling school. Go ahead.
right, exactly. And then I'd go out if there was a call for modeling jobs. And I had a lot of, different modeling jobs and things. And then, I'm sorry, I lost what you were asking.
Herb Caen.
Oh, Herb Caen. Okay, so then there was a local place around the corner, and they were having a contest for Miss Gangplank. It was the contest. And so they wanted me to enter that, and I entered this contest. And when I entered the contest, Herb Caen came to see the thing and was there that night and interviewed me. And later,
Did he try to date you?
no, he didn't. He didn't try to date me. He was a nice guy. He was a nice man, and he just interviewed me and had my picture was in the Chronicle and so on and so forth. And it was just one of the many things I had.
What was that, Rachel? What are you doing?
Huh?
I'm not doing anything.
Okay. I mean, how
No,
close are you to Judith, by the way?
I'm on a different floor of the house.
Okay.
She's downstairs.
All right. It's okay. I just was just hearing just like an echo of the sound. So I'm just wondering if you guys are too close.
I think you're having some sort of episode.
Okay. Probably. All right, Mom. So what? So I want to hear some other things. Like you told me you dated some famous people.
Yeah, I did, but that was after. Okay, so first of all, what I ended up doing was I got involved, or the school had me involved in the Miss Universe contest, and I won that contest, and then was going to Burbank to participate in the Miss Universe contest. And one of there was
Wait a minute. You
company
just said
called-
you won the Miss Universe contest.
I said
A
what?
local.
The local,
A
Miss
local?
San Francisco.
Oh, I thought there was the Miss Universe.
No, I wasn't Miss Universe. I was Miss San Francisco in the Miss Universe.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So
It goes
but,
through stages
huh?
until it gets to the universe. I'm explaining how Miss Universe works to Brian.
Yeah.
It goes through stages. So you won the local, to go to the next round, basically.
Next round. So that's the way these contests work. So anyway, I had a company called J.E. French, which was a huge car company in San Francisco. I don't know if they're still there or not, but they took me to J. Magnon's and bought me the most gorgeous ball gown to wear down there. So other than that, I had this ball gown. I went down to Burbank by myself. I didn't have parents. I didn't have anybody with me. It was just me. And I went, they said, you're off to this contest and so on and so forth. So it was an experience being in that contest. I met a lot of girls and so forth. And then there were some talent scouts there, and I got a few cards, and they asked me if I was interested in acting. Well, acting was not what I was interested in. I was interested in modeling. And so I decided to move to Hollywood. And I had a friend who I knew in Fresno who had already moved to Hollywood. And so she had an apartment. So anyway, I ended up going down, moving in with her. And I got a Screen Extras Guild card and started doing extra work and on movies to make money, and in the meantime, trying to get the modeling thing going. And so I was doing that, and I was modeling a little, and I was thinking I'd had a couple opportunities to do just a one-line thing. So I thought about getting an SAG card, a Screen Actor Skill card, so I could do some lines because I'd been asked to.
Do some lines.
Huh?
Do some lines of coke.
No, not coke. No.
Hey, Rachel, do me a favor. When you're not talking, mute yourself. I have a feeling that's the issue, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so I was down there quite a while, and I was just getting geared up good with all this, and I was it was okay. I was living with this gal who eventually did a Playboy spread, and eventually married Harry James, who was a famous trumpeter. But so I was.
Did you ever think about doing Playboy?
They asked me.
Oh, they did. And why did you say no?
Because when he came to our apartment to interview her, he
Who's
asked
he?
me if I was,
Who's he?
the representative from Playboy.
Okay.
I don't remember his name, but he came to our apartment and he was interviewing my friend Joan, and she was definitely going to do it because it was good money and so forth. And he asked me if I was interested in doing it. And I said, no, I couldn't do that. My parents would be really upset. So, I mean, I was very naive about that.
Did you want to do it?
No, I was too scared.
Okay.
I wasn't, I was a little, I didn't want to go that way. I wanted to do legit modeling. I wanted, if I was going to do a little bit of, I wasn't even really interested in acting. So. But,
was there a little bit of Catholic guilt there?
Oh, I'm sure. I had a lot of Catholic guilt. A lot of Catholic guilt because I was raised Catholic, and did the Good Friday and Holy Communion and all that, but nobody in my family did because my grandmother was divorced and my mother was divorced. But I was always, have you gone to church Sunday? Did you have communion? So that background, if somebody asks you to do a nude thing in Playboy, kind of comes up and waves its head and said, no, I don't think so.
Now, am I correct that you almost became a nun?
Well, my grandmother wanted me to become a nun. She pushed and pushed for that. And
did you think about it, contemplate it, and seriously at all?
Not really. I was, there might have been a point, there was a little, a Catholic church that I loved, and the priest there was wonderful. And I would go down, this was when I was in high school, and I would help him clean the altar and do all these things. And so I did think about, that avenue kind of, but, it wasn't like I was passionate about doing it. I had too many other things going around in my head. I thought, no, I don't think, and I was adventurous that way. I did my Catholic thing every Sunday, did Holy Communion. But after I did that, I'd go to some of my friends' churches because I wanted to see what other churches were like. I was very curious about the whole religious aspect. So, yeah, I don't think I just didn't feel like becoming a nun was the path I wanted to take. So,
because you wouldn't have been able to date a famous baseball player.
No, or a famous movie star.
So who were some of the people you dated that were famous?
Well, I dated a fella named Troy Donahue. He was a young actor at the time, and I dated him. And
why didn't that go anywhere?
Huh?
Why didn't that go anywhere?
Well, because he was a busy actor at the time, and I was young and impressionable, and I wasn't ready for any kind of a serious thing with anybody, really.
I could have been Troy Donahue's son.
You could have, or you could have been, I dated the son of Gallo Winery, who was, I dated him, but I wasn't that interested in him either. So,
Judith, I will say that everyone who's ever seen Grease knows who Troy Donahue is.
oh, do they? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So Troy Donahue, and he was a sweet guy. We had a couple dates, but it was like he was. Actually, I think Troy Donahue, he might have been gay. Later came out as gay. I'm not sure, but you know,
Rachel,
that
you're
was,
gonna have to research that.
yeah, I don't know.
Hey,
So,
Rachel,
listen,
let's.
this is my impression of Judith then. As for you, Troy Donahue, I know what you want to do. That was Judith.
Oh God. Oh.
So
anyway,
there is a parallel here, Rachel. There's two.
What's that?
there's a couple.
You moved to LA,
Mhm.
and there's a connection to Playboy.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, I moved to LA. And then after being there for several years, I was headhunted for some crazy reason by Playboy to help rebrand and become their travel content editor.
Did they
And I
ask
didn't-
you to pose?
No. I was well into my 30s at that point. They just
Hmm.
wanted my brain. They wanted me for my brain.
Right. Okay.
Aha, Dad.
So what happened? So you're getting close to when you met my father, right?
Well, what happened? Yeah. So what happened actually was, so my career was just starting to go, and I didn't have a car or anything, but I took bus when I do my extra work. I took a bus, to the studios and so forth, and then, I had the call for the Jerry Lewis movie, which was Cinderfella, and there was a call for ball gowns, so forth. So I took my beautiful Miss Universe gown on that set and ended up doing a special part in that movie. And just a visual part, but it was pretty cool.
If you,
Yeah.
for those listening and watching, there's a scene. It's the opening scene of the ball in Cinderfella, and you see like this grand staircase. It's from the camera is from the top looking down onto the ballroom, and you see my mom walking down the staircase from behind. So that's her in that scene.
It was an enormous staircase. I can't tell you how many steps, but it was.
Did you ever fall or did you
No.
trip?
No, because I'd been modeling, so I was pretty steady going up and down stairs and so forth. So but it was scary because this was a huge staircase, and
You met Jerry Lewis, right?
oh yeah, I did. I met Jerry Lewis and Count Basie, and Count Basie. Jerry Lewis was using Count Basie as the band on the set, and so yeah, I did. And Jerry Lewis actually one night after invited me to come in and see the Rushes, but I didn't go because I had to catch a bus to go home, if you can believe that.
So I could have been Jerry Lewis's son.
Yeah. So yeah, but he did. He invited me in, and I didn't go. And
Didn't he give you a cigarette lighter with his face on it?
oh yeah, I had a cigarette lighter which I gifted to my friend Gordon. But
With his face on it? That's obnoxious.
yeah, well, it was a say it for me,
Caricature.
a caricature of Jerry Lewis, and he handed them out for people who worked on the set. And yeah, I had that for years. And then my friend Gordon, who was special in my life, was having a birthday, and I gave it to him as a gift. So
Now,
anyway.
you also had a casting couch experience. You could have been part of the Me Too thing.
Oh gosh, yeah. So when you're working on those sets like that, it's you at that time there was all kinds of you get all kinds of propositions and things. But I was working on a set, and we were on location in Santa Barbara, and the producer, I got a message that the producer wanted to see me after work one evening. And so I went to his room, wherever it was. And
His
so,
name was Harvey Weinstein.
yeah, might as well have been. So anyway, I went in very naive, really naive. And one of the things I'd heard about was when I was down I saw this beautiful girl on the set one day, and I said, "Oh gosh, she's so lovely and so pretty." And they said, "Yeah, but she's on her way down." And I said, "What do you mean she's on her way down?" He said, "Because she slept with everybody she can sleep with, and there's nobody left to try to get her where she wants to go."
Oh, that's sad.
Isn't that sad? And I never forgot it. I never forgot it. And so I went to that producer's room that night, and I went in, and he had a script thing there, and then he started talking to me about, having a few lines or doing something on the script. And then he said, "Look, there's a little thing in the next room that," he said, "I want you to put this on and come back out, and we'll see if you're right for this." So I opened the door and I went in see this thing, and it was a see-through baby doll. Otherwise, you know what a baby doll is? It's a little see-through nightie with just panties,
Mhm.
and all very sheer. And I went in, and he said, "Oh, I want you to put that on and come out and read these lines." And I knew right then he didn't want me to read lines. So I said, "I don't think I can do this." And I turned around and left. So, that wasn't the first time that happened. So it's like, yeah, the Me Too thing was real strong, and to see how many beautiful girls down there were biting the dust because they'd slept with, you know, so many people trying to make where their aspirations for acting were strong, and they really wanted to make it, and thinking, "Oh, if I just do this, so I, you know."
Do you
So
think if your aspirations for acting had been stronger, you might have done it?
Brian, I don't know, because I had I had this set of values that and I didn't like this guy anyway. And so I can't tell you that answer, because I never did. I never did, because the picture of that beautiful girl already being on the skids was pretty eye-opening. And I
I just,
really
oh, sorry, Judith. I didn't mean to
Go ahead.
interrupt you. I just want to take this opportunity to point out that in the first time that Brian interviewed me, he gave me a hard time about talking to his 80-year-old mother at the dinner table about friends with benefits. Like I was besmirching his elderly mother with this racy, and you're asking her about a casting couch experience. I just want that acknowledged.
Yeah. Okay. So you got that?
You got that, Snyder?
Why are you angry with me? I'm not mad at you.
She's just
Don't be mad at me.
reminding
I'm
you-
not mad at you, as Weeby says.
She's just letting you know what you said to her, and you ask about my experiences, so I'm telling you.
No, I appreciate it. Anyway, so
So,
let's get into meeting my father.
well, let me do this. Okay, so what happened was, so I was down there working and doing okay. I was making a living, paying my way, paying my apartment, and so forth. Sometimes starving, but that worked. And so then I got this call from my mother, and she said, "Your stepfather is very sick. He has valley fever." She said, "You need to come home now and help me take care of the kids."
And valley fever is something that's specific to Fresno because of all the agriculture.
Specific, yeah, to the San Joaquin Valley. It's something you pick up from the dust and so forth, and
Right.
it's pretty bad. So she said, "You need to come home now." And so obedient daughter packed up her stuff and went home to help my mom. So what I did is, there were the three kids, and my mom went to work and left me home to take care of the kids. And that went on for a good year. And finally I said to her, and I had a couple things physically happen to me during that year. We don't need to go into that, but so uh, that year after I finally said, Mom, I said, I'd like to kind of get back to doing, you know, conducting my life and so forth. And so I kind of pushed the fact there was a new store opening up in this beautiful shopping center. And I went out and I applied for a job out there. They needed a buyer for the cosmetic department, and they had 5 different lines they were going to carry. So I got the job as a buyer for this cosmetic department, running the cosmetic department and selling and so forth. So I was doing that, and after several months, there was another girl worked at a shopping center, told me there was a club in Fresno called the Hacienda. It was right on the highway. It was, for the time, it was very spectacular. It had a mermaid pool. It had a regular pool. It had
It had a
mermaid-
bar that you could see under. It had
Right.
basically a window underwater that you could see everybody swimming. Right.
Right. There was
Yeah.
the downstairs bar had a mermaid pool, and so there was a pool there. And so I went out there one night with my friend, and she had met this guy, and she said, I want to go out, want you to go out with me so I don't have to go alone. Turned out to be your father and his brother, my brother-in-law. And so we met that night, and
Was it love at first sight?
No, it wasn't love at first sight. It was, what do you want to say when you're excited, you're enthralled with somebody, he's an entertainer, that kind of thing. It was kind of more,
You were mesmerized by him?
well, kind of, they were very good, and I was very impressed with that. And so then he asked me out, and we had a couple dates there, and then we had a long distance relationship. Otherwise, I'm still this girl from Fresno whose parents are there, and I'd either fly up to Oakland where I had an aunt, or Berkeley, and I'd go see your father entertain. A friend of his would pick me up, and then maybe we'd go out afterwards, and then I'd stay all night at my aunt's.
Why did
And
you have a friend pick you up? That's weird.
because he was working at a near the Hungry Eye. He was working in San Francisco,
Okay.
and so I had to. He'd have his friend pick me up at the airport because he couldn't leave because they were getting ready to go. It was that kind of time frame, and so we dated that way. He was in Palm Springs one time, and I flew down there just for the day and back.
But he
And-
flew you down, right? It wasn't like you had to pay out of your own pocket, right?
No, I couldn't have done that.
Right.
Send me a ticket. So
So
one
he was
thing led-
romancing you with planes and
That's right.
cocktails.
And he'd want me to stay all night. I'd say, no, I can't. I have to go back. So he'd fly me down there for the afternoon, and I'd come back later in that day. And yeah, it was kind of romantic. It was whatever. And I was so impressed with them because he had such a beautiful voice, and they were very good. So eventually he proposed. He called from, I don't know where it was, Arizona or someplace one night, proposed to me in the middle of the night and 2:30 in the morning, and
On the phone?
on the phone he proposed.
Well, that's not very romantic.
No. And so anyway, he proposed to me on the phone, and so we made arrangements for me to meet him he and his brother in Las Vegas, and we got married in a little chapel that's still there. Yeah.
Now, wasn't there a time he had second thoughts?
Oh yes. So I haven't gotten to that yet, but so we got married, and then they often went to Los Angeles to write, work with other writers on comedy material and so forth. So right after we got married, we went down to Los Angeles to uh, where they were going to work with a writer. And when we first got there, uh, it was the first couple of nights we were there, he said, "Oh, I think I made a mistake." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, I think I made a mistake. I don't think we should, I shouldn't have asked you to marry me," so on and so forth. And so I was like, "Oh, okay." It was like shocking,
Did he explain what that was about?
no,
Okay.
your father
Did
never.
you ask?
He just said, "Oh, I just think I made a mistake." So I said, "Okay, good. I'm going to go home." So,
So
that
you
was
weren't
my answer.
broken up about it, obviously, it sounds like.
Well, it was shocking. It was really shocking. And then so I
He
was
was pissed
preparing
off about
to.
it, probably, is what it
What?
was. You were pissed off about it, I'm assuming.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, I was pissed off. I was hurt. I was, I was shocked. So anyway, he goes out the next day and he comes back and he'd bought me a wedding ring because when we were in Vegas, we just had a little fake gold thing.
Elvis wedding?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. So
Okay.
so he'd come back with a wedding ring and said everything was okay, And so I should have that should have been a red flag in the beginning, but I'm pretty young here, so it's
So how was the marriage for the most part?
well, from that point on, we were on the road all the time, and his brother was a sweetheart. He was a nice, wonderful guy, and it went. It was going fine, and we were on the road, and I was trying to help them with whatever they needed help with. And then we were in LA. They were working with a comedy team called Martin and Rowan, and they were writing. Martin and Rowan were helping writing some of the comedy material for your dad, Bob and Ken. And we got a call from Bob, my mother-in-law, who said his father had fallen from some kind of scaffolding like 100 feet at work. He was in the hospital. He wasn't doing well. We packed up the car that night, drove all night, and when we got there, his dad had passed away. So then I kind of took my mother-in-law, under the wing, took her home with us and took care of her through that rough period. And yeah, so that was kind of that point. And so that was the first tragedy, within our marriage, and which little did I know there'd be more, but
And then, my brother was born.
yes. And then
Did that change the relationship at all?
you know, um, it was it's hard to remember exactly, but we were happy about the baby, and he seemed to be good, and then we had, I forget, uh, we had they were still going on the road a bit, and I'd be home with your brother. And we got, at that time, we'd bought a duplex, and his mother lived on one side, my mother-in-law, and we lived on the other one. And so when we went on the road, she'd kind of watch things over. So that's when your brother was young. Yeah. So we lived in near San Ramon, Dublin, California. And we had that duplex there and, lived there for quite a while. And then eventually, my mother-in-law, or your grandfather, who worked up here in Nevada City in the mines, and his brothers and so forth worked in the gold mines at the Empire Mine up here. And so Bob and I went up and looked at a piece of property up here and decided to buy this property. So we bought this
In
property.
Nevada City.
in Nevada City to eventually build a home on, which we did eventually. And you're going to have to keep me going here, Brian, because I don't know where you want me to go with this.
So what happened to Ken?
So we were married for several years, and my brother-in-law, who was, like I said, he didn't drink. He had an ulcer, so he didn't drink except if he drank scotch and milk or something. Sweet guy, but he was involved in, obsessed with the horse races. And so eventually he met, he had a first wife that he married she was kind of a showgirl. And but then she was not exactly mentally balanced. And anyway, they ended up splitting up. And then he met another woman, and all of a sudden his personality changed, more erratic and so forth. But long story short, he became schizophrenic paranoid. And so, we were dealing
He
with
thought that there was everything from the horse races are fixed. There were aliens after him, meaning like beings from other planets and things like that, right?
That's true. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty bizarre. And we were trying to keep his mental illness from my mother-in-law because we didn't want her to know about it. And so it was very touchy. And he was, this woman he was married to, I wasn't sure. I was a little suspicious of her and what was going on. But anyway, he got worse and worse. And eventually, your dad and he couldn't work because he was too, mentally unbalanced. And so he was going to a psychiatrist, but that wasn't helping. And so eventually we were so afraid because he was so paranoid that he, in order to protect us, that he was going to do something to us. And so it was really tough. So eventually what happened with Ken is he began to get better. And I hadn't seen him for about a year. I guess this was after we.
So that basically you're saying that you took a break they took a break from performing.
Exactly. They took a break from performing for a whole year.
And that's what you meant, like to protect you, right?
Yeah.
And okay.
They took a break from performing. And so then it was like a year later, he was with this other woman and still having problems, but he said he told your dad he was ready to go back to work. So they booked an engagement at the
In Monterey.
In Monterey at the Del Monte Lodge, which was a huge place, and because they were going to finally perform after a year. And so your dad had said to me, well, Ken hasn't seen you for a while. Why don't you go down with me? So Ken went down without us, and Bob and I went down separately, and we arrived a little late, and they usually had rooms at the hotel for us. And when we arrived, it was so packed and crowded with this convention that they had let our room go. So your dad and I went across the street and got a room. Anyway, they did this fantastic show and huge response. And because, like they hadn't worked for a year, but it was really good. And then after the show, we said to Kenny, your uncle, we're going to go get something to eat. Do you want to go with us? And he says, no. I said, I'm going to hang around and pick up our music after they're finished dancing, because the orchestra was still playing dance rounds and so forth. So Bob and I left and went back to our hotel room. And I remember I woke up, I sat up straight in bed in the middle of the night. There were all these sirens going, and I could see flashing lights and everything, because we were across the street from the Del Monte, and wondered what the heck that was. And I told your dad in the morning something happened last night at the lodge because there was a lot of police and stuff. And so he and I went and had breakfast. We drove all the way home to Grass Valley, and um, Bob's aunt and uncle were watching you and Shane, right? And so we walked in the door and they said, you need to call this friend of my brother-in-law. Something's happened to Kenny. So what had happened was that he had on the way down to that trip for them to perform, he had stopped at my mother-in-law's house when she wasn't home. He'd taken a shotgun that belonged to his father out of the closet, and he'd taken it down there unbeknownst to us. After the show was over and he caught the music, he went out in the parking lot and he blew his head off. And that was, and we didn't know it. We'd gone all the way home. So then we had to leave up here, leave you guys with the aunt and uncle. We had to drive back to the Bay Area and tell your grandmother. We had to tell Gammy. And so it was so difficult. And so when I think about it now, it was really tough. And she was heartbroken. So we got her together and took her home, and she stayed up here in Nevada City with us for about 3 months, maybe 4, until she was kind of healed. And then, she went back home and so forth. So that was a real shocker and really hard. And, the fact that to deal with her emotional, let alone our emotional loss. And in the meantime, your father is drinking off and on. So we had that to deal with. So then the next thing that happens is Shane's in high school, your brother. We had built our home up there. We were living up there. You were in grammar school. Shane was in high school. And
there's a
Shane came home
12-year
with-
difference between Shane and I, just to
Oh,
let everybody know. Yeah.
Yeah. So you're what, 40 what?
I'm 43 and Shane is older than I am. He's 12 years older. So
Right.
yeah,
He's
go
12
ahead.
years older. He's 12 years older. So you were in grammar school. He's in high school. And
He's about 16, right?
yes, he was 16. And, he was singing in the choir at school and so forth. And he came home one day and he said, oh, Mom, he said, could I really want contacts. And so I said, well, let's make an appointment with the doctor. Maybe we can see about you getting them. I don't know how, what. So I made an appointment. I went to the doctor here, who was a very good doctor and eye doctor. He had moved from the Bay Area somewhere, so he was quite good. And so I took him in and he examined his eyes, and he said to me, would you step outside a minute? I want to discuss something with you. And I said, sure. So we left Shane in there and he took me outside and he said, I see something in your son's eyes that I really don't like. I'm going to call UC Davis right now, and I want you down there by 7 o'clock tomorrow morning with him. There's something in his eyes I don't, well, you're flummoxed. It's a shock, and you're going, what do you mean there's something, without knowing even what it might be. So your father and I got Shane together and we went down, and there were 5 doctors who examined him thoroughly and said, your son has a progressive blindness. He has Usher syndrome, and he's going to go blind. Well,
So to make it clear, Usher syndrome, which with Shane and I, my brother and I have, is a combination of retinitis pigmentosa, which is the eye disease, and then hearing loss.
yes. And so, it was like, it was such a shock because Shane was healthy and, no signs of anything. And the only thing he'd ever had was when he was backtrack a minute, is when we were living in the Bay Area, he convulsed he convulsed one time without a fever, and I rushed him to the hospital. And anyway, they thought he had a tumor on the brain at that time and ended up in UC. So, okay, so I'll go back. Where was I? I'm sorry, I lost my track.
It's all right. So basically, you learned that he had Usher syndrome and retinitis pigmentosa, which is the eye disease part of it. And so how did that affect your marriage, and what happened?
Well, the first thing your father said was, don't tell Gammy, which is your grandmother. He said, I don't want you to tell Gammy, she can't handle this.
It's
So,
funny because she can handle a lot. She lost her husband, and she lost her son tragically both times, and it's always funny. She had a really amazing resiliency, and I don't understand why he said that. But anyway, go ahead.
I understand why he said it, because he couldn't handle it. And so he didn't want anybody else to know about it, because he didn't want anybody, he could not handle it. He could not handle it. And he, he figured by us just keeping it, that if it didn't go any further, it didn't exist, I guess. So that was very, very hard, because knowing that your son or sons are going to have a disability like that is so hard and so shocking, clear to your toes. The pain and the anguish you feel, and the wondering about the future and how are we going to handle this and so forth, was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. And then with your father not being strong about it, it was really tough. And eventually that's why I decided to leave him, was because I had said to him, we have to be strong for these guys to get through this. We have to be strong for these boys if we're going to go through this. And he said, well, I can't do that. So in my head, I'm going, well, okay, you can't do it. I'm not dragging you along because you're a weight anyway now. If you're not going to help me, I have to stay
You're
strong.
a boat anchor.
Huh?
You're a boat anchor. I'm not going to carry you.
Right, exactly. And that's how I felt about it. I thought, I can't let him drag me down. I need to be strong. I need to be so strong to take care of these two boys who I don't know what their future is going to be like. And it was painful and it was scary, because I hadn't worked outside of our marriage except helping them with their act for years. And I thought, what the heck am I going to do? And so I started planning a little bit. And like I said, your father was drinking. And so I had went through an incident with him where I came home one day and there was a noose hanging from the tree in the backyard. And it scared the crap out of me, because I thought he was either going to hang me or hang us or something. So I packed us up, you and Shane and I went down to his aunt's. And I said, I don't know what's going on with him, but I need to get out of there right now, because he scared me. I don't know what's going on with him, what's going through his head, why there's a noose hanging from the tree. And so, because he was acting so bizarre. So at that point, eventually I did go home, but I started planning for what I was going to do. So I decided that I would try and get a real estate license, because I thought I need to support myself. I've got to have a way to support myself. And so I told your dad about it. Oh, you never did that. You can't do that. And he gave me nothing but trouble about it. I talked to your grandmother about it, and she said, because it was, I don't know, it was
Gammy. When you say grandmother, Betty.
Gammy. I talked to Gammy about it, and he wouldn't give me the money to go to the school, but she said, if he won't, I will.
And this is just for clarification. Gammy is my father's mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my mother-in-law. So she was sweet about it. And she said, if he won't help you, I will. And so eventually, right to the morning I left to go to my first class, the car needed oil and he wouldn't help me fix that. I mean, he did everything, every block he could think of, which made it really tough on me. And then I go down there and I'm taking this real estate class and I'm going, the book is 5 inches thick. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I haven't studied in years. I don't know if I can do this. And then, so I go to Sacramento, I come home, he'd be sitting there waiting for me to cook dinner, etc. And then I would have to go upstairs to study my real estate and he wouldn't watch you. And you were crawling kind of like Nico, Rachel. Brian was crawling all over me.
I think she's
you can't do literally anything at all.
So you can't do anything. And I was trying so hard to study and it was difficult. And so that went on through my course of taking that course. And your dad just kept saying to me, you'll never pass that course. You'll never pass it. So the day my letter came, and I did pass it by some miracle, and I had a real estate license, and I knew that I had a way for us to escape what was going on. And then eventually I asked him to leave the house and and decided to go through with divorce proceedings. And then I went through a nightmare of attorneys up here who took advantage of me. And so it was, it was very difficult, but I finally got divorced from him and worked, started working. I worked selling real estate. I worked at my friend Gordon's brass shop. Later, I got a job because the real estate was taking me away from you too much. It really bothered me because, so many people come up to look at homes just on a weekend for a lark. And I didn't like leaving you or putting you with a babysitter on the weekends because that was the only time I had with you. And it became very difficult. And I thought, oh, I've got to find something else. So I got a job at a lighting company. And so I was working with contractors, figuring out people's lightings for houses. And I was there for quite a while. I don't know exactly how long, but my boss wanted to send me to lighting school to become a lighting consultant, which was pretty awesome. And, I was going to do that as another source of learning something new and an income. And then a doctor friend of mine and his wife in town, she was a nurse, had said their brother was coming from back east to visit, and they wondered if I'd, be interested in going out with he and their mother and something to an art show. So anyway, I ended up meeting this fellow from back east.
His name is Al.
His name was Al.
I don't know if he's alive or dead, but yeah, his name is Al.
I have no idea, but I was so, at the time, I'm struggling to make a living. I was doing okay, but I was so worried about us making a living to keep us going and Shane going. Shane was in college. And so I finally, this fellow came out here, or he kept calling me long distance and wanted me to come back east. And why I did it, other than I was thinking
he was charming, right?
He was extremely charming, and he was extremely smooth, and his family was so lovely. I mean, his sister was a nurse, her husband a doctor, his mother was really nice. And so I figured this is a nice family. And anyway, long story short, I rent the house and gather you up, and you're going, what the heck are we doing this for? So we go back east. And
Now, Mom, we don't have to go into this in detail. I
Okay.
mean, because it was traumatic for both of us, and I think for those listening and watching, the easiest way to describe this experience is watching the film This Boy's Life with Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. It was very similar to that, and we both experienced abuse from him,
yeah.
and he was not a healthy. Um, his mental health was not good. And we don't have to go any further than that, Mom, because it was hard for both of us. And I can say this, that I'll just kind of, if you don't mind, I'm just going to just paraphrase what happened. He was pretty volatile and physically abusive. And right before we left, I had come out of my bedroom and he was sitting there, and I just kind of playfully, you know, punched him in the arm just as a joke, and just kind of walked away. And I went to the bathroom where you were in, and I was waiting for you to come out. And the next thing I know, he throws me up against a wall, knocks the pictures over, and then he screams at me to put my hands on the counter. And I don't know what he was going to do or what was going to happen. But the next thing I know is you came out and you basically saved me. And then we ended up leaving and moving to Los Gatos, which is in the Bay Area of California.
Yeah, and while I was, yeah, and he had a split personality. And what was really hard is that he had a nursery business, and then he bought this ice cream business with a partner. But when I got back there, he threw me into that, and I ended up running the ice cream business, this was like a Ben and Jerry's quality type with 24 flavors and so forth. I ran this business myself. I learned how to make the ice cream, which was a horrendous, you can't imagine what this is like.
Yeah, and these were old 40s ice cream machines. They were stainless steel, large drums with huge blades and very
Huge
heavy
blade.
equipment.
The blade of the ice cream machine that I used was 75 pounds.
Yeah.
And the parts, I could lay it out on a tempering cabinet, would be just covered with the parts. It was very complicated. And I'd make this ice cream, put it in the hardening freezer, and then out. But I was running this ice cream business until one day when he wasn't cooperating and wouldn't help me. And I ended up throwing the keys at him and said, "You run the damn place." So I got another job, and eventually
At Deluxe Check Printers, it
at
was
the
like an
luck
office gym.
check printers, right?
Yeah.
And then I gathered you up, got Shane to come back there, and we left. And so, but I ended up coming out here and getting a job with
At Deluxe Check Printers in Campbell, which is by Los Gatos in San Jose.
right. And
Yeah.
so I don't know where you want me to go from
No,
this.
I don't think we have to go into detail. We had a decent life, in Los Gatos. We had a small apartment, a little weird. It was a 1950s apartment that, was in this right behind Safeway in the center of town. And it was the only street of where there's apartments. And then we'd look up out our windows and see these, mansions on the hillside where Steve Wozniak lived. And we didn't have any money. We had nothing. Literally, our TV was on cinder blocks and pieces of wood, and we didn't really have any furniture. And it was, but you pulled us out of it. You worked at Deluxe for a while, and then you went to massage school and esthetician school, and I had a great high school experience because of that. And I want to tell you, I appreciate it, because that experience in upstate New York where we lived with Al, that was pretty shitty. And,
For both of us.
I want to let you know that, I appreciated it, that because that could have escalated to the last scene in This Boy's Life where it's, Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio end up getting in a fist fight, and then they end up leaving. So, I mean, it was a hard experience, but we got out and we survived. And I appreciate that you did that, because you could have stayed, you could have endured it, and you didn't. You left, and you got us out, and it was hard, and we didn't have anything. We didn't have support, but we made it.
Yeah, there's so many. Yeah, and then when Deluxe was downsizing, then I had to find another new career.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking the streets trying to figure out now what the
Not
heck.
walking the streets like a hooker though, but you were like,
No, 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 walking the streets to clear my mind to say, now what am I going to do?
right.
So that's when I decided that I would take a massage course. And then there was an opening at San Jose City College, a new course for estheticians. And so I was still working at Deluxe at night, and I mean, during the day, and going to massage school and then aesthetic school uh, till I got my massage and aesthetic license. Yeah, I did that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we had a good life. And but there's some before, to wrap everything up and to get kind of, this is an opportunity, Mom. Is there something you want to tell me that you haven't told me? This is the time. The other thing is I want to also express, my appreciation and tell you that, uh, it was our life. We had some challenges, but we made it. We survived, and you had a great sense of humor. We laughed a lot, especially when we were living in Los Gatos, and we found peace, and I found peace. And um, I was pretty depressed when we moved to Los Gatos because I didn't have any friends, and we had, and we had moved back and forth because the first time Al told us to leave, and then and then he told us to come back, and then we ended up living with Betty for a while, which sucked, and then Al said come back, and we finally went back, but we got out of there, and I found my love for acting in Los Gatos and doing theater in high school, and I just want to show my appreciation that I think uh, you did what you had to do to survive, and you made choices that you felt were going to give us a better life, and that didn't always work out, but you always made it right. You found a way to make it right, and when we moved to Los Gatos, that was a relief for both of us, I think.
Yeah, and handling, your brother went through such a hard time when he was adjusting, as you are now, to his uh, uh, big loss of vision, and
How
so
did it feel to have two sons with Usher syndrome, both with losing eyesight and hearing? How did that? I mean, that's a lot, right?
it was a lot, and especially when I was by myself in it, because my family was away and I didn't have anybody to really
And my
cling.
father didn't really acknowledge it either. So
No,
it,
he was in denial. So your father didn't help me emotionally or in any way, or either one of you. And so I was kind of by myself in this, and that to explain the pain of watching your brother go through, he went through a drug alcohol period, and he had such a hard time before he.
yeah, which makes sense. It's a horrible loss,
It's a
and
horrible loss,
yeah.
and it was a huge uh, pain. I have, what I feel about you and Shane is when I think about the disability, I feel a deep, deep pain that probably will never go away. But I also, on the other side of that, have so much pride in watching two human beings who both have beautiful hearts, who are both extremely talented, and who handle this a lot differently. Your brother's doing very well, and you're going through one of the most difficult periods that you'll have with this. And the pride I feel and the strength. I mean, as far as I could always think, God, it's how the hardest thing is sometimes is to just get out of bed in the morning. And when you have that kind of disabilities, there isn't anyone that can understand that or feel um, what's that like. You can pretend, you can whatever, or try to think about it, but you cannot walk in your shoes or your brother's. And so the constant, I'll never lose the feeling of pain of watching you two go through it, but the pride I feel in what beautiful people you are and what good hearts you have and how you're both making it work. And you're my watching you have experienced so much happiness with Rachel and Nico and Marcelo, and this relationship is beyond excuse me. It was like somebody gave me a beautiful gift to help to see you have a love in your life and happiness. And that's all I could ever ask for you or Shane. And Shane's doing very well and he has a great job. And so my love for you both is deep. And Rachel knows you have to be a mother. You have to be a parent. You have to have that blood feeling to know the depth of the hurt and the pain. So, but I couldn't be any more proud than I am of both of you. You know? So.
And I acknowledge that pain because that's something that I won't. I mean, it's possible that I will experience it, but I don't know. But the point is that I acknowledge that, you know, you must experience an enormous amount of pain watching us experience and adapt to our disabilities. And I don't, and I know I don't always adapt well. I get grumpy and difficult to be around because you know, it's a loss, and it's a loss that distorts reality and perception of who I am. And so I want to acknowledge that I know it must be difficult to watch what we're experiencing. And you not only had to do it with one son, but you had to do it with two sons. And so the one thing I do want to say is that, you know, this podcast is about loving beyond fears. And that's kind of the basis for it is having discussions about loving beyond fears and people experiencing what people do in their life. Because one of the questions I ask is how do you go down a path of creativity and love versus a destructive path? Like how do people make those choices? And I think that, you know, I've straddled that line between living in fear and isolation and mistrust. And then with you, I think what has helped me is you know, you love courageously, you take chances, and you're not afraid. Um, and I think that is what has helped me to find Rachel and experience love, because I think in the past, experiencing this loss has made me isolate myself and not want to be around people and say, you know, make many excuses for why I'm not living. And I can attribute my choice to loving beyond fears because of you. And so I want to acknowledge that and honor that. And that's why I wanted to interview you, is because I wanted to show my appreciation and showcase your life and what you've been through, and what we've been through together.
Well, I feel my gratitude toward your attitude and Shane's for whatever you can do to find the strength to get through your day is immense. And my gratitude to my daughter-in-law, who I love so deeply. Um, Rachel and I have a strong connection, and it gets stronger every day. And she understands me, and I understand her in so many ways. And the fact that she came into our lives has been, I figure my thought was always, I guess I was supposed to have these two sons. I guess I was supposed to take care of you. And I used to, you know how you always tease me about being positive. I've tried to be positive in every way, shape, or form, or I never would have been able to put one foot in front of the other. And the fact is that no matter how difficult your problem is, that you understand that you can always overcome it, and you can always do it different, and you can find a way to find your path to making a beautiful life. And you have a wonderful foundation now with Rachel and your family, and a gift that's a gift that's so special, Brian, that this relationship happened. So I can't, you know how much I love you and your brother so deeply. And my life has been about you guys. So, you know, that's the way it's been. And so whatever I had to do to make it, I did it. And without fear, and I'm still not afraid, you know. And so I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to do new things and make our lives work and better. And I hope you'll do the same. I hope you'll keep putting one foot in front of the other, no matter how difficult it is, because you and your brother are both so talented, and there's so much you have to give, not only because of your talent, but because of your hearts. And so I love you, and I hope that I hope I've given you what you want in this interview. I was a little nervous about it, but yeah.
You did wonderful, Mom. And I love you as well. And I appreciate, you know, I think there was always a sense of selflessness throughout your, you know, your experience that you, let me say this. You didn't, you know, lapse into, you could have drank, you could have said, fuck it, I'm going to go and have fun and, you know, and I could have been left alone. And you didn't do that. You were always there. There was always food, you know, comfort, warmth, shelter. And it's very clear that you lived for us, and it showed. And you didn't have support. You didn't have financial support. You didn't have anything. And you made it work. And I love you and I appreciate you. Rachel, do you have anything to say in closing? Are you still there?
Oh, I'm still here. I've just been listening. I feel like you guys needed to have this conversation, so I was keeping my mouth shut for once. I don't really have much to say, except for I'm so glad, you know, you said a long time ago when we first got together that you were able to understand what your mom had been through a lot better through experiencing me in the thick of it. And I really love that you have started to, you know, because we take our moms for granted, we take our parents for granted, we take the people that are closest to us for granted the most, I think. And I think that you know, I'm just so happy that you are recognizing what she's done, because she has lived for you. I lived for my children, and not all parents do that, not all mothers do that. And she's very special. You're very lucky, in that heart that you have that she's talking about, it came straight from her. I mean, that's where it came from. Didn't come from Bob. The funny maybe, but not the heart. The heart is all Judith. So I'm just so appreciative that she raised such a good man, that I get to finally have one in my life, and that Weeby gets to have one in his life. You know, someone, you know, his father's wonderful in his own ways, but he's the patience and the kindness and the hard work, and, you know, there's all these things that you represent, that Judith instilled in you. It's very valuable to me.
Well, thank you. Well, everybody, thank you for listening and watching. This is The Blind Man in Black. I'm your host, Brian Snyder. You were here with Rachel Snyder as co-host, and my mother, Judith Leach. I don't know why you still kept that name. You just didn't want to change it.
Pretty simple. It's so expensive to change your last name. You know, it was like forget it. I don't, you know, I am remarried to my present husband, Tom, and he's a wonderful man. And So yeah, so it was more convenience than anything because we've only been married, what, 2 or 3 years, but
After you change your name a few times, Brian, it just gets old.
it gets old after a while, Rachel, you know. So there's our other parallel, Rachel. Our 3 husbands or whatever. Yeah, so
All right, everybody.
Who's
Thank you,
counting
Mom.
after 3, really?
What was that? I missed that.
I said, who's counting after 3, really?
Right.
yeah, who counts? Yeah.
Right.
So, but thank you, Brian. Yeah, so I love you very much, and I'm so proud, and I have no doubt in my deepest heart that you and Rachel both will be so successful. You know, and Shane is already there. He's successful, and you two have so much talent. And so I am so grateful that Rachel has touched my heart, because all these things that I talked to Rachel about, nobody's been through them with me like Rachel has since we've talked. And so the parallels, I just want to thank Rachel for being there for me also. I love you very much.
I love you too. Can I let your husband back in the house now?
Yeah. No, he has to stay outside. Be quiet.
All right, everybody. Thank you. And everybody who's listening, watching, please like, subscribe, review. Even if it's a bad review, it's good. If you don't like these videos or the Apple Podcasts, send them to your enemies. And yeah, thank you so much. And you can follow this on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or go to the website, Blind Men in Black. Thank you, everybody. Happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Rachel. Wife, Mom.
Your wife, Mom.
Oh, no. Well, we're having a super awkward ending. I don't know where I am. Hold on. I can't end this. All right.